Hello, and welcome to Regrets I've Had a Few. I'm Paul Hunter, Artistic Director of Told by an Idiot, and this is a podcast where I talk to friends and colleagues delving into what made them the person they are today.
Hello, and welcome to this first episode of Regrets I've Had a Few in 2024. My guest this month is an actor and writer who has recently branched out into directing and dramaturgy. As a writer, they have a truly unique voice and the ability to combine the political and the personal, the touching and the comic, an innate sense of theatre that quite literally brings audiences to their feet. Welcome, Charlie Josephine.
Oh, what a lovely intro. Thanks very much. That's nice. Wish I got that every time I walked into a room.
Well, you can have that. That's yours,
Thank you.
Charlie. I should say thank you so much for joining us. And I also need to come clean to the listeners if they don't know, but I am very biased because I am fortunate enough to be working with Charlie and performing in their brilliant play, Cowbois, which we all did in the RSC last year and is shortly about to open at the Royal Court Theatre in London. And I'm going to say something which I've said to you, Charlie, but I feel I need to say it to the public. It has been, the experience of working with you on this play has been one of the best experiences I've had as an actor ever. And I've been doing it a terribly long time, Charlie. So that means something.
I'm so happy to
I
hear
think
that.
Well, it needs to be said because the team that you and Sean Holmes, the co-director, brought together is truly unique. And the playful, collaborative, caring, and at times wild atmosphere you created was a joy to be part of. So we will come to Cowboys, I'm sure, at some point in this. But I wanted to start with a quote of yours, Charlie, if that's all right, which I was really taken by. I think I read it maybe back when we were rehearsing. And this is you saying, "My brain is fizzy and my body likes to move. I'm proper passionate about making art that's honest, visceral, sweaty, particularly stories that centre working class women and queer people." It's brilliantly articulated. It feels totally authentic. Now I know your work with it. But how did it come about that you were arrived at that kind of statement, I suppose, or that you articulated that?
I mean, that took a long time. So in the 2020 pandemic, that marked 10 years of me being graduated from drama school. And I made myself a website in that time, like you do, bored at home in the middle of a global pandemic. I thought, I'll make a website. And I sort of Googled how to do it and was quite chuffed with myself because I'm really terrible with technology. And I looked at other people's websites and they, sometimes they've clearly written about themselves, but in this sort of, like third person. So they'll be like, oh, Dave makes work, or Sarah does this, or, and I thought, I'm just going to write it like it's me, because it obviously is, and it would be a bit silly to pretend otherwise. And then I thought, well, what do I do? And like, what am I trying to do? And I think a lot of people, weren't they, at that time, having quite big questions about their life and sort of putting things into perspective a bit and like taking a moment to reflect. And yeah, that's what I wrote down. I sort of thought, I think that's sort of what I'm doing, and if it needs editing in the future, I'll change it again. But I think that basically sums it up. In the neatest way that I can.
Well, it's interesting what you said there, because what I love about it is it does sound obviously exactly like you talking.
Yeah.
And there's lots of moments when you read things where it doesn't sound like that, like you say about it. And it makes you think a little bit about my co-founder and dear friend and colleague, John Wright, and his book, which for me is a seminal book, Why Is That So Funny? And the way he writes in that book, I remember saying to him, that sounds like you talking. And I don't like theatre books very much. I'm not very interested in them in general. But what I love about his book is it's like being in the room with him. He and that similarly, I feel that not just about your statement, but about your writing as well. We'll touch more on that later. But I'm going to take you back, Charlie, as I always do with my guests, is to ask you to maybe try and remember your first kind of theatre experience, what you saw, or was it at school or with the family, and what impact, if any, that showbiz experience had on
Yeah,
you?
I can remember it viscerally. But to start, really, I was sort of doing drama before I'd actually seen any. I was like this weird little queer non-binary trans kid before we had any of that language, in the early 90s. My mum, bless her, did her best, but like, tried to support me. And I've got ADHD and I'm dyslexic, and then on top of that I had a speech impediment as a kid. So that was kind of like having fireworks inside your head, like loads of energy, loads of ideas, loads of creative ways of responding to the world. But like, I couldn't articulate a sentence literally because my mouth didn't work, but also because the way my brain works, they call it phonological processing. It's like I don't really go in a sort of, it's very challenging for me to go in a linear pattern when I am forming a thought. I've got better at it over the years, but so yeah, I was just this mad little kid with loads of energy, and then couldn't talk properly. So then I just stopped talking. And my mum was a nurse. She just retired recently after 42 years in the NHS. She's an incredible woman.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing.
That's a hero.
Yeah. And she had a mate that was doing like training to be a voice therapist. So we managed to get, I think for free, I think I was like her case study, some voice therapy, what I hated. But out of the back of that, this woman said, oh, you should get Charlie to go to a local drama club because it might boost my confidence. And my sister was doing ballet at Jane Marie Dance and Drama Club, which was this very serious woman, Jane Marie, who had, I remember her having loads of hairspray and lipstick all the time. And she terrified me. And my sister would do these ballet classes in this church hall, and it was like plinky plonky music. And like, I can remember the pink shoes. And like, I sort of secretly wanted to join in because I quite like some of the shapes that they were making with their body, but I would never be seen caught doing something that girly. So eventually I got talked into doing the drama club bit of it, and I was the youngest there by far, like when I was at primary school. But I was really good at it, and I really loved it, and I was obsessed with that film Oliver with Jack Wilde, and I must have watched that film 1,000 times, and like, I really wanted to be the Artful Dodger, of course, and just
it's the best part.
It's the best part. So I was sort of doing drama club from a very young age, and then my mum would take me to the Old Town Hall in Hemel Hempstead, which is still there. It's a tiny little 60-seater studio theatre, and you get quite a lot of
we performed.
I was going to say I wouldn't be surprised if you toured there because they get quite a lot of.
We did our early shows there.
Brilliant theatre companies come and test stuff there before they then go into London often, and so what you'd get is a show. I mean, like, again, not age appropriate. I'd have seen the Caucasian Chalk Circle. I remember that really vividly. Mother Courage. Like, I was like a 7-year-old watching all this like quite adult content, and then afterwards they do like a workshop. So that's like, 3 hours of babysitting for my mum for like £6. Do you know what I mean? So she was quite happy.
Yeah.
And then we'd go Watford Palace Theatre. My dad worked in this factory, and they had a scheme with Elton John, something to do with Watford Football Club. Did he run it at one point, or?
Yeah, he was president or chairman.
So it was like kids for £1. You could go and watch the football, and then you could go to the panto at Watford Palace Theatre. And I remember going with all these big burly men from the factory, all these dads, and we'd go and watch the panto, and I just loved it. Like, I knew that there was jokes that were too old for me to understand, and I really enjoyed watching the dads laughing at stuff that I knew was a bit naughty, but I didn't know why. And there's a sort of queerness, isn't there, in the Dame, and like, and you got sweets chucked at you, and you could shout out. I love a panto. I think I've been quite snobby in the past about panto and musicals, but actually I think they're fucking great. Like, a real kind of working class community all together, huge emotional catharsis, like really fun night out. So yeah, then
I totally agree, Charlie, and I'm laughing a little bit at this vision of your 7-year-old self both embracing the works of Bertolt Brecht in the theatre and also the pantomime with your dad and his mates from the back. It sounds like a brilliant introduction to show business. I agree with you about pantomime. We did one years ago, Lyric Hammersmith, where I played Widow Twankey and Haley was Aladdin. And I think I love pantomime. I also think it's very
Mm,
experimental as a form. It's very
yeah,
wild. It's really, if it didn't exist and someone invented it today, it would be like, wow, what's
yeah,
this thing? It's kind of, which is why the Americans don't
y-
quite get it either. Like they go, what's this? What's
yeah,
going on?
yeah. It is very. It feels very British. The kind of like it's the one night out where everyone can sort of let rip a bit, and it is a full family affair. And there's not a lot of art
Absolutely,
forms
everybody.
that do that, I think.
No, I totally agree with you. And so you obviously were getting your theatre time at the old town hall. Were you doing any performing at school? Was that happening or?
Yeah, like Christmas shows.
Yeah.
I got the main part in a Christmas show, and I remember coming home. My parents were arguing. This is just before they broke up, and I thought, oh, I won't tell them that I'm the main part. I'll just let them come and watch it, and it'll be a surprise. And I think I sort of thought that would like help them get back together. So much pressure on a young kid. Obviously, that didn't happen, but I took it so seriously. I think okay, I'll be really honest, and this is a little bit earnest of me, Paul, so please forgive me. But
That's all right.
I
No, no.
really, there's part of me still that really believes in the power of theatre. I'm laughing because I feel like a wanker, but like, I really do. Like, there's something sometimes that happens in a theatre that is like magic, and they are so precious, those moments, and like genuinely life changing because they're inspiring, or they open us up to empathy, or something, or they connect us and remind us that we're all connected, or they just make us feel alive. And they're rare, but when they happen, they're absolutely golden. And and I think from doing the Christmas show at school, I
Yeah.
wanted to try and achieve that for the audience. I wanted them to have that moment of magic. And so I just really took it really seriously from like
Yeah.
such a young age. I was like, we've got a job to do that's like sacred. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I knew everybody's lines, and it's like yeah, really took it seriously. I think I've still got that in me now, where I'm like, the bar is really high. Like, we're striving for
Yeah.
something. It's not casual. Making theatre for me is not
No,
casual.
I couldn't. What you just said as well, Charlie, absolutely. It's not earnest at all. But what's brilliant about what you've just articulated is exactly how I feel.
Mm.
So totally. Um, and sometimes you can question that as one gets older, and I'm slightly
Yeah.
older. And sometimes you can find yourself committing to something that is utterly ridiculous and utterly ludicrous with all
Mm.
your heart in that moment. And it really, really matters. And of course, it's good to have a perspective on that. My family give me that perspective very clearly, who still think that I just go out with my mates and mess around
Yeah.
for a job. And in some ways I do. And I think that's important as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
to mess around with people. But that sense of commitment, do you remember what the play was? What were
I
you
was I
performing
was
in?
Father Christmas in a sort of contemporary version of the Nativity, I think. I remember
Ah,
wearing some boots that were
really?
far too big, and I was sort of clumping around in
So,
them.
and it's interesting in some ways, your statement as well about, what you talked about, what theatre you want to make. And I get a feeling probably similar backgrounds. My dad worked in a factory. My mom was a dinner lady, and I was going to the pantomime. So there wasn't context for me, and by the sound of it for yourself, in the family of people doing theatre or
No.
going to the theatre a lot. So I think sometimes when you discover it the way that maybe you and I do, and it really ignites a flame, then it becomes a really burning flame. I think sometimes because you haven't been exposed to it, I
Yeah.
suppose, or you've got no kind of sense and context, I suppose. So moving a bit further forward, when did you kind of think, I want to try and do this properly? I want to try and make this what I do.
Yeah. I mean, I was very naughty at school, and so I did a BTEC in acting instead of doing A levels because you just pissed about
Oh,
for 2 years getting stoned. and um, and then one teacher there Katie Posner, who now runs Payne's Plough. I don't know if she remembers that so if she listens to this, hi Katie,
Oh,
but I don't know if she remembers, but she was one of my tutors at college and had to put up with me, you know, drinking too much and all of that sort. And she said, you should go to drama school. And I didn't even really know what that was. I sort of thought of like Billy Elliot, do you know, like trying to get into dance school.
yeah.
That was my only reference really. And then my granddad died and left me like £2,000 in his will, and it had to go towards something educational. So I was allowed to spend it on auditions for drama school, and I'd never auditioned for anything before. And I don't know if it's the same now, but they're quite expensive. You know, you've got to travel there, you've got to
Yes.
pay to audition. Yeah, it's a ridiculous system, really. So I ended up auditioning for loads of drama schools, and I got into, I think, two. And one of them was East 15 on the contemporary theatre course run by Uri Rudner. And I was only 17 when I auditioned, and he said, you're too young, come, you've definitely got a place, but for next year, he said, go and get your heart broken. get some life experience. And he's so provocative, isn't he, as a clown, really?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So yeah, then I did that course, which, as you know, because you've worked with some CTs, it's a really messy sort of theatre making course rather than like an actor training. So we did a lot of devising, a lot of clowning, a lot of movement, a lot of directing each other, a lot of music. Like we made a klezmer band at one point. I can't really remember why, but that was great. You know, and worked with some incredible practitioners like yourself. I remember you came and did a sort of workshop day for us, and I was really sorry to blow smoke up your ass, but I was really blown away by it. And you know, like Uri was really fantastic at bringing in theatre practitioners who are actually working, who are not kind of stale like teachers who used to want to be an actor or a maker or something. Like, you know, Kirsty Housley and China Play.
Oh, wow.
And like people like that come in, and so it was really inspiring for me. And I think really at some point in those 3 years I started to be like, oh, I really want to do this. And I wrote my first play there. April DeAngelis mentored us.
Wow.
Yeah, and we took it to the Edinburgh Fringe when we graduated in 2011. I sort of was directing my mate's play, and I was in mine, and that it was a sort of very incestuous affair, really, of everyone doing a bit of everyone else's job. And about 5 people came to see it, but one of them was the NSDF, and I got a commendation for writing from the NSDF, and that was kind of confidence boost for me to be like, oh, maybe I'm all right at this writing thing, because I really just started writing to give myself a part to play. I kept.
And well, what was this play?
It was called Perfection, and the title was spelt wrong. It had 2 F's, which is not a great title. And it was about body image. And you know, the culture at the time, particularly at that school, I hope it's changed, was a sort of trauma porn. It was really like dig deep and find the most dramatic thing that's happened to you in your life and write about it and make some art. And obviously we all went mad. And I sort of was really ill at the time with an eating disorder, which luckily at the moment I'm like in a good place with. And but I wrote about it when I was still really active and ill, and then try to perform it every day for a month in Edinburgh. And of course you go mad. And now whenever I talk to young people, I'm like, please don't do that. It's not necessary. Like, it's not necessary to make good art by sharing really personal things that you're not ready to share, or by like finding, you know, traumatic life events, or it doesn't make the work sexy and cool. It just makes you vulnerable to like more mental health issues. You know?
I totally agree with you. I also subscribe. Well, I don't subscribe necessarily to the theory that all great art comes from great struggle. I have a real problem with that. I think you can make really great things from having a really great time. And I think Cowboys is a very good example of that. I loved every single minute coming into work. And sometimes, you know, you're struggling, you're trying to find things out. But on the whole, the atmosphere was joyous, playful. Everyone was kind and considerate, and we made something really good. Sometimes people think, oh, it's got to be a really struggle. You've got to really suffer to make something good. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that's necessary at
me
all.
neither. And particularly, thank you for saying that. I'm really pleased to hear it, because it was something me and Sean worked really hard on in the preparation for rehearsals. We were like, we want to have fun. We want to like have a really joyous time and work with kind people. We know we joke that we chose kind people over talent, but that's obviously not true.
I don't mind that.
No, it's a very talented bunch.
But I think it's interesting that you say about you and Sean about it before rehearsals, because I think it's really important that if you're going to think about that you pay attention to it. It's not something that just happens by chance. The people that in some ways are holding that room have to pay attention to the atmosphere and spirit that they want to generate or engender there. It doesn't happen by, we all turn up and by chance it takes some consideration and some, how are you going to actually make that happen? But no, that really struck a chord with me. But so you've written your own thing, and then obviously a show which you said yourself sort of changed your life was Bitch Boxer. And how soon after Perfection was Bitch Boxer sort of emerging?
The year after. So, I mean, I graduated in 2011. We took, in the summer, we took Perfection to Edinburgh that summer. About 5 people saw it. We came back skin and unemployed. I didn't have an agent, I sort of was working in a coffee shop. I'd managed to break my ankle up there, so I was walking around in a moon boot. It was a disaster, Paul. Great start to a career. And then I thought I'm gonna have to. My mum was bored of me moaning and said, just write yourself something to do, and it's that tough love thing, and so I started to write really monologues, because I thought, if I ever get a chance to audition for something, at least I've got a good monologue I can use, and then slowly it started to grow into this one person show, and then I just applied for loads of funding, and by the following summer we were up in Edinburgh as part of the Old Vic New Voices scheme. I wouldn't have been able to afford to go without it, and I sort of just very cheekily was like, you have to put this play on because it's about this summer. It's about women boxing at the Olympics, and that was happening at the same time that we were performing. I think Nicola Adams got a gold medal at exactly the same time that I was performing one day. It was a weird synchronicity.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, then we sold out for the rest of the run, all thanks to Nicola Adams, really.
And had you done any boxing prior to writing the play?
No, I started for research. Just to see what it was like. I mean, I'd had fights in a playground and in the pub and stuff, but I hadn't ever trained, and I just loved it. There was something in my body that felt really familiar. Like I was like, I don't know if this is in my family, but I was like, I can really do this, and it's very addictive, and it completely changed my life. And I started competing and ended up competing internationally and won a national title. And
what?
Yeah.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's mad. It's really mad.
And so do you have, one of the title, obviously, of the podcast, do you have any regrets that you didn't suddenly pursue a boxing career?
There was a moment where if I'd fully committed to it, I could have at least. I mean, I had a trial for the English boxing team, and the England boxing team.
Oh, Charlie, that's amazing.
Mad, right? All for research for play. And they said, if you really commit to this for a year and then come back next year, then we'll monitor you again and see if you're then ready to compete for England. but I think I'd got like an acting job or something, and I was like, I was doing Romeo and Juliet at the RSC, and I was like, you can't do a big gig like Romeo and Juliet and compete, like you just can't do it, because I mean, you end up with awful black eyes and all sorts. So I just thought, no, come on, like I actually want to make theatre. Like I'm not really a boxer, I just like it.
Well, you're clearly better than that by the sound of it. That's a brilliant. And you mentioned, you touch on the Romeo and Juliet, directed by wonderful Erica Wyman, and I know that was the kind of early genesis conversations around what became Cowboys. But just before then, I have to come clean because the Wi-Fi in my house is a bit struggling, and I'm doing this from my daughter Elsie's bedroom at her desk while she's at school. And you know this, you've met her, and she's an enormous fan of you and your work. And a part of the reason, I think, why I was so desperate to be seen for Cowboys, well, the reason was that Elsie and I came to see I, Joan at the Globe, and it doesn't always happen this. I think sometimes you have very different feelings when you see something, but she and I both adored I Joan. It was one of our theatre highlights of the year, and again, as I've told you, and such a brilliant reworking of a story and so theatrical, and I thought, I don't know how this happens, but I really wanted to want be in one of them. And Elsie was very honest. She said, "Dad, even if you hadn't been in it, I'd have gone to Stratford and seen the play." So, luckily, I managed to be in it. But I mean, interesting. Obviously, I Joan was a big play with a big cast on a big scale, and you've done Bitch Boxer and various other plays. But what did it feel like suddenly being at the Globe with a big play of that size?
Yeah, I mean, it was intimidating. Yeah, I sort of, yeah, like you said, I've written one person shows. I've written sort of two-handers. I've performed in my own work quite a bit, and then it sort of goes. The order isn't as neat as it looks. So Cowboys was commissioned first from the RSC. That came sort of end of 2019, I think. I wrote it in the pandemic, and then Joan came the year afterwards. So I was doing a workshop day there, and it was the first time I'd left the house in like a year, and suddenly I was at the Globe, and Morgan Lloyd Malcolm had organised this week of writers, and I was fortunate enough to be selected, and we were just sort of sat in the Globe having a chat about what it could be like to write for the Globe. And she's a brilliant woman because she really holds the door open for her once she's like stepped forward in this industry. And after Amelia, I really feel like Joan's in conversation with Amelia, like that they're sort of cousins or something. And I think they're part of a trilogy, and I feel like there's another one coming from someone else. But so they phoned me up. I was in Asda, and were like, "Would you write a play about Joan of Arc?" I was like, "Yeah, go on then." But yeah, it was terrifying to write. I really had to learn on the job how to write for a big. I'm an actor, so I know how to write a good scene. I know how to write a good monologue. Like I know how to make an actor excited to do a speech or to say a couple of lines or to give them something physical to do that's challenging or exciting. I can do that bit, but the sort of structuring and the dramaturgy, and I was very intimidated by it. And I got some help from Sean Holmes, actually, from Simon Stevens, from Morgan Lloyd Malcolm. I read that Stephen Jeffries book about 20 times, the one on playwriting. And Becky Lapham at the RSC really helped to write Cowboys. And I think once I'd written the sort of first two drafts of Cowboys, I was like, oh, I can write big plays. So when they said, will you write Joan? I was like, oh, I think I can do this. But it was really hard. And then Sarah Dickinson was the dramaturg on that. She was brilliant. She helped me to write Bitch Boxer. So it was nice to work with her again. And yeah, I had to just really learn on the job. But also, like, we had a deadline. I mean, they asked me to write it in September, and it was going on the next summer. Do you know what I mean? And there's something about the pressure of, like, if I don't write this, it won't get written. Like, that helps me to concentrate, because it's like there are going to be some actors standing on stage, and I don't want them to feel like a lemon. Like, I want them to have something to do. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and I think a deadline is very important. Yeah. Whatever role you have. When we make our shows, and most of our shows aren't scripts, don't start from scripts, they start from an idea and we create it in the room. But I always think there is a good thing about deadline. Whatever position you're in, to know in 3 weeks' time we're doing, I will stand up in front of some people and we will do this. There's not a point of going, oh, we're not going to do this anymore. You're going to do it. Yeah. So
it's very fast.
It's a really important thing.
It's very slow in my experience in telly and film, painfully slow. But in theatre, it's really quick. Like, if you get asked to write something, it could be on that year, And again, I really, if an audience has left the house, I mean, COVID taught us, didn't it? Like, it's a real privilege to have a live audience, and telly's really good. So if you're leaving the house and you've got a babysitter and you've got on the bus or whatever, and you've paid a ridiculous amount of money to come to the theatre, like, I want to make it worth your time. I want it to be.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely, and obviously, around Joan, there was lots of other stuff that people were talking about the show in sometimes very negative ways, and I remember, like, obviously lots of people who hadn't even seen the play were usually, and it was so clear they hadn't seen the play because what they were saying is utterly ridiculous. And you've touched on this a little bit, but how do you, when all that is going on as well in the background, even saying negative things and commenting, whatever, and you're trying to get that done, how do you manage to keep the two things or keep one at bay while you focus on
I'm
the
better
work?
at it now. I had to learn on the job. I knew before the Globe did that the Daily Mail would write something and people would explode on Twitter, and I sort of tried to
Yeah,
prep them in advance and say, listen, I think my version of Joan is non-binary, and I think some people will be very angry about that because because I know, I read the newspapers and there's a very violent anti-trans rhetoric going on at the moment in the UK, and so I knew the reaction wouldn't be jolly and warm from a certain demographic of people, but I think, and they sort of heard me and did a few of my suggestions, which mainly were collaborating with Gendered Intelligence and All About Trans, who are these incredible companies that can help you. But it did explode. Yeah, bloody hell. I remember I was walking up Hampstead Heath trying to have a nice sort of Sunday with my partner, and my phone just exploded with people going, "Oh God, I hope you're okay." And I thought, well, I was. What's happened? You know, and then my auntie phones me. She was in France. She was like, "You're on the news in France," and I was like, "What?" Like, we were on the news in France. That in the UK,
Well,
it was just crazy. Like, there was such a huge reaction, and it, it really wasn't about the play. It was about everybody's fear around gender and the trans debate, as we call it, and the culture wars and stuff like that. So yeah, it wasn't fun. I really didn't enjoy it, and I got a lot of hate from people, and learned very quickly how to set security settings on my Instagram and things like that, and
you know,
and to make sure that
uh,
I'm not contactable. It all goes through my agent. So I've learned how to be how to shut myself off from it. And also, I this might be useful to share, is that I did really learn um what I am responsible for and what I'm not as an artist, and like
mhm.
how to hear feedback and how not to. And it's the same as getting reviews in a newspaper, really. We all sort of hate reviews, and it feels lovely when you get 5 stars secretly, even though you're like, I never read reviews, but you do. And then it feels shit when you get 2 stars. And but I really had to learn, like, what feedback am I going to let in? What is in service of the work? What's in service of my mental health? Like, and to be really disciplined with who I listen to and who I don't. So now every
Mhm.
project I do, I sort of sit down with a cup of tea and write, who am I making this for? And I have sort of 5 people that I'm going to really care about their opinion. And if you're not on my list, I'm going to practice being neutral. Like, I hope everyone has a great time, for example, when they come and see Cowboys, but I'm really making it for 5 people. And those 5 people are the opinions that I'm going to personally really invest in. And if you're not one of my 5, then I'm politely neutral about your opinion.
I, I totally get where you're coming from. I remember years ago, 30 years ago, we made our first show, and luckily it was a success. And I remember Simon McBurney coming to see it, which for me was a big deal. I
Yeah.
was in awe of Complicity, very in awe of Simon, and brilliantly, Hayley knew he was coming but hadn't told me, because I think I'd have had a meltdown if I knew he was in the audience. So she wisely knew I couldn't handle it and didn't tell me. Anyway, he liked the show, which was a big deal for me. But he said one thing that really stayed with me. He said, it's a really great show and you'll go on and do other things. He said, the only thing I would say is choose your critics
Yes.
carefully. And it's exactly what you say. And I thought that's a really, he said, you'll have everybody wanting to tell you things about what you do. But the people you listen to closely, choose those critics
Yes. I love
carefully.
that. I'm writing that down.
It's kind of what you're saying, but I thought that phrase stuck
Yeah.
with me. But now we come to the joy that is Cowboys, because what I think, having performed it for a while now and enjoyed every single second of it, and I don't want to think about it, articulate it too much. I just want to do it, and that's my job as an actress, to do it and not think about why it is. You just present it, and but one can't help, given the reaction, every night, is see the kind of effect it has. And let's be honest, all theatre doesn't have the effect that maybe it's intended to have. And I've been in many of those shows. Um, uh, Whereas an effect, which is, coming back to your own words, quite visceral, that tends to happen in Cowboys, and the journey that an audience goes in on. goes on. And I think because, as I said, your sense of theatre and your instinct is so strong, the piece for me remains endlessly entertaining. So that the political things that are going on and what they're discussing, for me, land much more than if this was a polemic where you were really, it feels that it's not that it's coming under the radar, but it's because we're having a great night. It feels that it lands more. Does that connect with you as the writer?
I mean, I definitely knew the audience I was writing for when I wrote it. I knew this. I knew the architecture. I mean, I was asked to write a play for the Swan at the RSC, and I knew the shape of that room, and I knew what it feels like to stand on that stage, and I knew who the audience would be, and so I was really specific in writing for them. I, Joan, for example, could be more polemic because it needed a moment of someone jumping off the stage and ranting about gender and Twitter and TERFs and Tories, and that worked for that audience because, there's no roof in that building and it feels like a gig and there's people standing up and you sort of want someone to jump off the stage and be in your face a bit and like running around. So that worked, but that wouldn't work at the RSC, it just wouldn't serve the... I guess it's the dramaturgy, really, the choice of it. So I knew that I wanted to write something that would allow an opportunity for a, what we call a TERF and a Tory, for them to come and watch it and be surprised that they fall in love with a protagonist who's a trans person, or they get a little queer awakening in the back of their brain, or they question their own relationship with gender through the character that you play. I said to you in rehearsals, there will be a lot of men in the audience that relate to the sheriff and will just, hopefully have a moment of allowing themselves to relax the kind of rules that they're stuck in around gender. I'm not suggesting that they'll all go and get such a fabulous dress and hat as you, but maybe they'll maybe they'll just soften slightly and the world will be better for it. I think I'm really conscious of like writing for, my stepdad, John, works in a factory and reads the Sun newspaper. He's a white man in his 60s. And I don't want him to feel stupid when he comes to watch a play that's about, the trans experience or the queer experience or even the female experience. I want him to feel like he can be open to that, but also there will be a lot of young trans people who are hungry for the representation. I'm writing for them as well, and like I'm writing for kind of cool theatre makers who, I hope are impressed by the sort of form or the dramaturgy or the style or something, but also like the people who've just come for a good night out. So I'm trying to like sort of write for everyone, I guess, in a way, but at the risk of diluting it. Do you know what I mean? You just got to do it confidently. I do know swagger, I think.
I think that you definitely do that, and you encourage us to do that. And I think what you're talking about is what theatre should be. It should be able to hold lots of different people in an audience, not just one group of people, but all those different people. And I think Cowboys, and maybe also that by going to the world of Cowboys and the genre of Cowboys, it lets people in a different way sometimes. And I spoke to audiences who came, well, me and my wife just love Western, so that's why we came. And then they're kind of opened up to something they didn't expect, So I think that's, and obviously we talked a bit about movies, and you obviously you're steeped in watching those Westerns. I have to ask one question that stuck in my mind from rehearsal, which is to do with movies while it's something in my head, is I remember for some reason we mentioned the movie Some Like It Hot, and you said, I love that film, but it's problematic. Yeah. And I never got the chance because we had to carry on. Could you just elaborate just slightly on what you were...
Yeah. I love that film. I love it so much. It's one of my favourite films. But it is problematic. Like, there are these two white men that are dressing up as women. And in terms of like representation, I think we have to be very nuanced now and delicate and aware of what we're doing. I mean, we had this conversation, didn't we, with the sheriff?
Of course we did.
And like, of course we did. Because trans women are women, and men cross-dressing is a very different thing. And so, but because we've like been taught to laugh at men in a dress through Shakespeare, through theatre, through film, the impact that can have on trans women can be really damaging, because our brains can like connect those dots where they shouldn't be connected.
Yes.
So I'm wary of that in that film. And there's also some like tricky sexual politics stuff, I think, around Marilyn Monroe, like that I haven't quite put my finger on.
Yes, I think there is. I think there is. Perhaps we should leave it there. We should remember it as something.
But the music, I want to write something about jazz. I was going to be a jazz musician when I grow up, and at some point I'll get back to it. But I'd love to write something about jazz one day, and just that sort of dreamy, like the black and white. Oh, it's just great. It's great.
Should. Charlie, I could talk to you all day, but you haven't got all day, and neither have I. But we will be talking very soon when we're in the rehearsal room and returning to it brilliantly. I just had one final question, and again, it might be too big a question. You might not have a thought about it, but I just wondered if you could give one piece of advice to your teenage selves, what would it be?
I mean, they would not have listened to me, Paul. Let's be honest, they really, really wouldn't. I don't know, get on with it probably would be the. I spent quite a lot of time moaning that people weren't letting me do things, and actually I just needed to be proactive and get on with stuff. I think, and also there's something about vulnerability. I've struggled to let my guard down as a human and as an artist, and I think actually, you know, humans are really hungry for it, and that it can be a beautiful and brave thing to let yourself be seen and to celebrate vulnerability. So I try and put little moments of that in my work now, where characters can just show us a little chink in their armor. And they are always my favourite moments in plays. So they just make me go, as an audience member, like, I can see behind the mask, you know? So I might have said something like that to myself, but like I said, I probably wouldn't have listened.
Well, I think our listeners will definitely want to listen to that, because that's a really, it's a beautiful thing to finish on. Charlie, thank you so much, and I'll see you very soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Thank you.
Dear listeners, if you've enjoyed this idiot podcast, please spread the word